You're listening to the DC Real Estate Podcast, the podcast where we focus exclusively on all things local to the DMV area. Local investors, local knowledge, local experts. Our journey starts now.
Hey everyone, we're back for another episode of the DC Real Estate Podcast. My name is Russell Brazil. I'm an associate broker with Arla Real Estate. We're back here with Jack Sadden of DMV Flippers and Ron Gallagher again. How are you guys doing?
Awesome.
Good.
So this week we're going to talk about getting to the real nitty gritty of Ron's strategy with the rent by the room. There's a lot of very specific details that he uses to implement the strategy that have really allowed him to optimize the strategy to make the most money. So maybe we should talk about first the types of properties that you're targeting for this.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're looking for like big bedrooms. So like my search criteria for the MLS is always, well, first you got to figure out what is the number of unrelated adults you can have in your jurisdiction. In DC, it's 6. So I look for like 4 or 5 bedrooms in DC. You know, it has to have a minimum of 4 bedrooms, and that will open up. You know, I wouldn't buy a 4-bedroom place. I'd buy a place that has 6 bedrooms. But typically the 4 bedrooms, they'll have a back porch room, they'll have a dining room, or something else that you can, 1 or 2 other rooms that are, potential bedrooms that you can, rooms that you can convert into a bedroom.
You need a closet and a window. Is that correct?
I mean, that's what it is for a official bedroom. Like if you were going to try to sell one of your flips, you couldn't say, just a back porch room without a closet is a bedroom.
So actually the code calls for a closet or a room for a dresser. It needs one or the other. It doesn't need both. It needs 70 square feet, egress window, and 7-foot ceilings.
And that's, I believe, both for selling but also for renting. Is that correct?
Correct.
But I'm not renting, if I rent out a dining room that doesn't have a closet.
Well, in that case, it's still a legal bedroom because it has room for a dresser. It doesn't need both, as long as you have the egress window out the back of the house.
Now, what I do now, a lot of those, a handful of my rooms are converted bedrooms. They were previously a porch or a dining room or a living room. Sometimes you want to convert the living room into the bedroom because the dining room is more in towards the interior of the house and doesn't have windows. So sometimes the living room is the better option, and you leave the dining room as the common area because the common area doesn't have to have windows.
Correct.
So, but what I'll do, what I've been doing lately is my handyman, one of his strengths is drywall, wood construction, painting, things like that.
Carpentry.
So for like, but like electrical work and plumbing, he's not so great at. But so let's work to his strengths. And for, like $200, he'll erect a closet. So you just pick a corner of the dining room and have him put up, there's already going to be the wall there on one side. So all he's really doing is, building one little wall.
Build that wall.
And then putting a hanging rod there and maybe a shelf above the hanging rod. And there's a closet. And people do seem to react to closets. Like the feedback I get when I try to rent out those rooms that I've converted into bedrooms that weren't previously bedrooms or never intended to be a bedroom. I have had a lot of feedback where someone says, well, it doesn't have a closet, or I need a big closet, or whatever. And my solution in the past has been just get one of those wardrobes that you put together with the rods and the.
That's actually really interesting. What are things that you find other than closets that make the rooms more appealing to people? You find other stuff?
I mean, definitely the size of the room.
Size.
People want a desk because everyone's working from home now. People want room for a desk. Yeah, so definitely the size of it, because in DC, some of the bedrooms, especially in like a traditional row house in Northwest, there's that 3-bedroom configuration where that third room is always staged with a crib, like I say in the pictures, because you couldn't even fit a twin-size bed in there because there's no way with the doors opening and stuff that you could fit anything but a crib in there. So a lot of times those rooms become like glorified closets. And luckily, a lot of those houses have with that 3-bedroom configuration with a tiny crib room, have that back porch. Maybe it hasn't been drywalled in yet, but it's that screened in back porch. All you do is take the screens out, put it in drywall, and then you have that back porch room. That what I've done is I've given the bigger bedroom 1/3 of the back porch, and then that small crib room gets 2/3 of the back porch room. And then, so what I'm renting is really 2 rooms, like a sitting room and a bedroom. And some people can put their desk, and that other room, that secondary room, the back porch room, can be their workroom, their office, and then their bedroom is the bedroom part.
So we're looking for 4 bedrooms typically.
4 bedrooms.
And the ability to add extra bedrooms.
Right. So if I'm looking at a 4-bedroom and I look at the listing and I see in the pictures that it really is a 4-bedroom and there's no potential, like the back porch room doesn't exist, and the one of the 4 bedrooms is that tiny crib room that I could never rent out anyway. I don't even know if it's 70 square feet. Probably not. They're really small, and no one would ever rent that. So, it has to be like 4-bedroom with the opportunity to convert something into 2 more bedrooms.
So the dining room or the living room is always a good choice.
Exactly.
Basement's always a good choice if there's the ability down there. And we usually need 7-foot ceilings down there to add a basement down there, or add a bedroom in the basement.
And if you have like a basement that's not a 2-unit, which is going to be the most common situation, that you're going to have a basement in DC with interconnect stairs. So one thing that I was kind of short-sighted in the past, where I would just kind of try to convert the basement into like a 1-bedroom apartment or something. Yeah. But if your basement is just like the wet bar and it's really not conducive to putting it into a 1-bedroom, look for the basement. You can sometimes cram 2-3 bedrooms in the basement.
Yeah.
So, because the basement doesn't need if you have the interconnect stairs, the basement doesn't really need a common area. So
there's a common area upstairs.
There's a common area upstairs. So basically gives you the whole footprint of the bottom level of the house. So that's something I learned from one of the sellers that sold me a place, is that he had 3 bedrooms in the basement. And I was like, oh, how clever. You took the rent by the room strategy and even took it even further than I did. I wasn't thinking of like how many rooms can I cram into the basement, but he knocked down walls, get rid of a common area, and has three bedrooms in the basement.
Now, one thing I think that's been really interesting in the way you've optimized these properties is we've bought now multiple properties where the landlord was just paying the utilities. That's obviously a large cost, but you don't do that. So what's your strategy with the utilities?
So everyone that we've bought from was previously not billing back the utilities, and the excuse was always, oh, I don't want to be bothered with that or whatever. But it takes me like 10 minutes a month to bill back the utilities. So it's pretty simple. I just keep a spreadsheet, and what I do is I go in, all the bills are posted by like the middle of the month for the previous month, and then I add up all the bills and divide by the number of people in the house, 6 or whatever it is. And then divide the total by 6 and then bill it back to them. And how I bill it back to them is I previously was using Cozy. Now it's apartments.com. And apartments.com allows you to add a bill, like a one-time fee, to your tenant's ledger. So I just add it for each tenant once a month. Takes me about 10 minutes. They get an email saying there's a new bill. They have to manually go in and make the payment because it's a variable amount every month. And then that's it. No one's complaining.
Do you ever have issues if you have multiple tenants all getting billed evenly and one of them's using a lot more electricity or water or something than the other ones?
It's never come up. I mean, if the electricity bill ever got high or whatever, I mention it to them.
Someone's running a Bitcoin and mining thing out of their out of one of your homes?
I mean, if someone was doing that or whatever, it would. I mean,
It'd probably be you.
yeah, but it would. If one of the bills gets a little too high or whatever, I would just like during the lockdown for the pandemic, people were home, so people were consuming more electricity and things like that. So the electricity bill got up to the point where it was like $105 per person.
That's pretty high. That's pretty high.
And I just said, you guys are paying it, so I don't care if you're happy with what's going on, but just be aware that this is the highest it's ever been. And if there's any sort of like energy savings that you could do, like if you just left the lights on and all, in the house all the time because you just said, oh, who cares? Maybe you'd be a little more conscientious about it. So, but they pay it, so I really don't care if they,
Now, one question I have is, I know when you bought the house in College Park, the previous owner actually had this thing locked over the thermostat. Did you keep that, and do you have that at the other properties or no?
Yeah, so all the properties have a lock over the thermostat or have a Nest thermostat that you can lock with the app. I did lock it previously, but after the pandemic happened, I didn't want to be going to these houses and unlocking it and switching it from heat to cool or adjusting the temperature because someone said it was too hot. So during the pandemic, I unlocked the thermostats and just said, have at it. You guys are paying the utilities, but you guys adjust it as you need to, because I'm not trying to go into these crowded houses and getting COVID.
Yeah. So one thing I think that's sort of interesting with part of your strategy is, so when the house is vacant and you're getting all new tenants, is the pricing strategy you use on each room, but also the pricing strategy that you use on the lengths of the lease, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah. So when a tenant tells me they're moving out, I'll take it as an opportunity to raise rent. Typically, I don't raise rent on a current tenant. If they're going to renew the lease, they can let's just keep status quo. Let's keep, let's not, ruffle any feathers or whatever. Let's just, leave it alone. So I look at least prior to the pandemic when my vacancy was like 0%, I would be kind of happy that a tenant was telling me they were going to move out, because that's a chance for me to increase the rent.
Yeah.
So, like those tenants I inherited in College Park, they're still paying like $800 for a studio.
Oh man.
But can I raise the rent on a 92-year-old man? Like, what am I going to do? Raise the rent to market rent? It's an extra $200, whatever, for me.
And the turnover cost would be.
But it makes a huge impact on his life. And so I try not to say, like I said, I try not to raise it on my current tenants. But I'll look at the, I'll go on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, and I'll kind of do my own little, like, what's the current market rent for a bedroom in Petworth or wherever. Yeah. And, and then I'll look, it has to be around the same size and the house needs to be nice. I try to keep my rentals a little nicer, so they show nicer, so that at any point, if a tenant tells me they're moving out, the house is kind of like show ready. My houses show really well, like the 14th Street house with the Brazilian bamboo wood floors that glisten and they show really nicely.
I have an interesting question for you. Would you ever, as you get older and, presumably more money coming in, rent by the room's obviously very intensive. Would you ever consider, obviously less profitable, but never turning any of these into single family rentals?
Yeah. I mean, so like what was the primary goal in the beginning? It was to make enough money so I could double what I was making at my government job, and then quit the government job and retire and live off of my rentals. Mm-hmm. So maybe 5 years from now, when rents have increased and whatever, then maybe I can say, okay, let's turn this back into like a 5-bedroom house. Let's give the dining room back let's make the dining room back into a dining room. Let me rent it out to a group of friends or a family. And, you're not going to get as much rent that way. But if rents have increased, maybe I'm closer to that. Like, let's say market rent for a 4-bedroom is in Petworth is $4,000, and I'm getting more like $5,000 or $6,000 with the rent by the room. Mm-hmm. With rental increase, maybe now the market rent is $5,000, and the delta isn't so big anymore.
Right.
And then I can hire a property manager, because there's no property manager that's going to manage these rent by the rooms.
That's one of the number one questions I get from people. Who's going to manage the property? I'm like, well, you are if you're
And even if
implementing
you
the
get a
strategy.
property manager, I don't think
I had
most property managers are capable of handling it.
I had a property manager before, and I was managing the property managers.
Yeah.
Like I was like, what am I even spending money for? Yeah. So the likelihood that you're going to find a good property manager is pretty low.
I mean, I think all of us self-manage our rentals, right?
Yeah.
My thought was that at one day I'll be at a run of Russell's meetups. Someone's going to come to me afterwards when we're networking and chatting. They're going to say, can I bring you out for a cup of coffee and pick your brain, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm going to tell them I don't drink coffee, but I'm going to have an open house this weekend to rent out one of my rooms. Why don't you come to the open house, see how I operate, and I'm just assuming there'll be like a mentee-mentor relationship, and maybe I'll groom that person to become my property
Your
manager.
fatal flaw in this plan was assuming that there'll be meetups again.
Well, or whatever.
We talked about last episode.
Whatever.
That may have been. Did you see when this whole plan? Did you imagine a pandemic would happen in the middle of it? Was that one of the things that you factored into your?
No, absolutely not. And I had quit my job just as the pandemic was starting. So I've never been financially free and retired when there wasn't a global pandemic.
So it's probably not very fun to be financially free and retired during the global pandemic.
It is not how I predicted my retirement would be.
And this strategy did become a little harder to implement during the pandemic, right?
Yeah. Like I said previously, I had 0 vacancies. And there was a point during the pandemic where I had 12 vacancies.
Out of how many?
I don't know how many rooms I have, but
50 or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. But so, it was 12 versus onesie twosie, and always.
And that's $10,000 a month.
Yeah. And before the pandemic, like I said, when I was at 0 vacancy, if someone told me they were moving out, I would hold 1 or 2 open houses on a weekend and fill it. It took nothing to fill it. And it's starting, it's ever since like July was like the turning point. July of 2021 was the turning point. And right now it's not too hard to fill vacancies, but there was that
1 year stretch.
Oh my gosh.
From mid 2020 to mid 2021.
It was horrible. And then on top of the vacancies was also, I never had deadbeat tenants before. I never had tenants that didn't pay. And then I had like 5 tenants that weren't paying. Now, some of them I've gotten money through like a rental assistance programs. Some tenants have paid up. Some tenants just left in the middle of their lease and moved to Alaska and stuck me with the bill. But, I'll take them to court or whatever.
So definitely a challenging time during COVID implementing the strategy.
So challenging.
But let's go back to your pricing strategy. So you're pricing them a little in line with what they're doing. But one of the things I like that you do is every room is priced slightly different from the other one, which I think is an interesting, right? Just an interesting strategy, right? They could be 2 exact rooms, but you're pricing them at least slightly different.
Mostly based on square footage of the room.
Yeah.
And like if the room has a beautiful bay window, then okay, maybe that's a little bit more. But yeah, it's mostly the size of the room and kind of experience. All this stuff is kind of nuanced, right?
Yeah.
Like, so if I know that people have in the past paid $850 for a room and I've had no problems filling it in the past for $850, then I'll take that into consideration. Like I shouldn't ever have to drop the rent for that room lower than $850. Another thing I found too is that I'd rather kind of hold out for, and this is maybe to my own detriment. How there's like kind of 2 philosophies. One, keep lowering the rent because you just got to get someone in there and someone will rent it for $500 or whatever. And then that's $500 coming in versus 0. But I find, at least in DC, when you start dropping the room below 800, especially below 700, your tenant pool, the people that apply, have 500 credit score. Like people self-exclude themselves. People know, if they're doing their search criteria and it's below 800 and you show up in their search results, then you just don't find the same high quality tenants. I find like $800 is the line. And if I keep my rents above $800, I tend to attract higher quality tenants with high credit scores. When I lowered during the pandemic my rents to get people in the rooms, I found
You moved into a totally different tenant class.
and I never had to deal with that before. Like I never got tenant screening reports where there were 5-car repossessions on the, I never saw reports like that. I never saw credit scores in the 500s and things like that. But how I dealt with it is during the pandemic, I was desperate. So I did take on some of those low credit score people. But what I did is I signed them to what I call starter leases. Let's sign a 3-month lease. If I get their security deposit, which I collect as the equivalent of 1 month's rent. So then I've got first month's rent, security deposit. So the worst case scenario is I might lose the third month's rent. Like they might not be able to pay rent for month number 3 because I'm considering the security deposit for month number 2. So it's a try before you buy, like before you commit. Like we're both trying each other on. Maybe they find out that they don't like living there or whatever. So they get to try it, see how the roommates are, see how the property is, whatever. See how I am as a landlord, see how they get along. So they get to try it without a long-term commitment over 3 months. And I get to try them as a tenant. If they pay me all 3 months on time, then I say, okay, now that it's like a probationary period. And now that things are going good, okay, I tell them I'm more comfortable with a 6-month lease for the next lease. Or if things didn't go that well, but they went okay, let's sign another 3-month lease. Let's try one more time. And so that seems to have worked out quite well, actually. And because some people have a bad credit score, like I remember one tenant, he tried his luck in like New York City and didn't work out well. And he was like, you're going to see on my credit report, it's pretty bad. But everything was centered around like 2016 when he tried to go to New York. Yeah. And I could see that. All the bad stuff happened in 2016.
And a lot of people make bad, financial decisions when they're 21, 22. I'd shit credit then.
Right. And then, he turned out to be a great tenant and he paid me throughout the whole pandemic. Even though he wasn't even there, he basically stayed with his mom in Baltimore during the pandemic. But he still, even though he wasn't even staying in the room, still paid the tenants the whole time. So he's a great, and he just, a couple months ago was like, hey, he moved out. Actually moved back with his mom, I think, because like, why pay rent if
makes sense.
If he's staying with his mom the whole time. So he was like, let me just wait out the pandemic at my mom's because that's what he's been doing anyway. And then I guess it was time to leave his mom's towards the fall when things were looking better pandemic wise. And he was like, hey, do you have any rooms available or whatever? So again, we're talking about building relationships. I've had several tenants come back to me years later, whatever. Maybe it's for themselves. Do you have a room? Or maybe it's for their friend that's just moving to DC. So, and the other thing too, before we move on from bad credit, bad tenants, the other way you can kind of protect yourself as far as risk mitigation, as far as, the tenant's ability to pay rent is ask them if they have a cosigner. Can your parents cosign for you or whatever? And oftentimes the parent or whatever is willing to do it. So that's the other way. If someone's got a 500 credit score and times are tough and there's a pandemic going on and you've had a room that's been vacant and you're just trying to get someone in there, do the 3-month starter lease and try to see if they can get a cosigner.
So on the idea of the starter lease, going back to also your pricing strategy, you also price your rooms based on how long they're willing to sign a lease for, which I think is a absolute genius thing to do.
So I don't see this on anyone else's listings, and I can't do it during the pandemic. But prior to the pandemic, what I would do is, because I wasn't dealing with shitty credit scores before the pandemic. So I was dealing with people with 600s credit scores in the 600s, 700s. So I felt totally comfortable. Incomes, I'd call their job. They had incomes that were more than 3 times the monthly rent. So I would always want to sign a 12-month lease. But people have different, some people are only in DC for 6 months or whatever.
6-month internship.
Right. Or 6 months, 6-month job, whatever, contractor position or whatever. So I understand that that's the case. So what I did prior to the pandemic, the market does not allow me to do this during the pandemic. But prior to the pandemic, what I would do was I would charge a premium for a shorter lease. So I will give you a 6-month lease, but so I don't have to go out and find another tenant in 6 months. I'll charge you $75 more a month. So there's a premium for that. Anything less than 6 months, like if you wanted a 3-month lease, it would be $150 for a month-to-month lease, or for the privilege of having a month-to-month lease.
So let's say a room is going to be $900 on a 1-year lease. You would go to $975 if they did 6 months, and $1050 if they did a month-to-month
less than
lease.
6 months, right? 3-month lease, month-to-month. And now one other thing that the pandemic has has shown me is I will not do a month-to-month lease. I haven't signed a month-to-month lease since the pandemic. There's no advantage as the landlord for signing a month-to-month lease, I've learned.
So they're all minimum 3 months now.
They're all minimum 3 months now. Now, when things get back to normal and all my tenants have 700 credit score, I will I'll reopen the idea of a month-to-month lease. Maybe I'll ask them to commit to a 3-month lease, but it will be, if I ever did month to month again, it would definitely be at $150 premium or maybe even higher. And people don't have a problem with that. Like I know lots of apartment complexes that do this. You know, if you want a month to month lease, you do pay a premium, and you pay a pretty hefty premium for that flexibility to be able to leave on a 30-day, notice or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, that's, and I, there's a way to increase your gross rents pretty easily.
What pre-pandemic, what percentage of your tenants would you say, and I know you're just kind of guessing here, were doing less than 1-year leases?
There's just a handful, just a couple, maybe like 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So not that many, but it gives them the opportunity. I don't want to say no to a tenant that has a good credit score, good income. I met them. They're a nice person. They love the house. They love the room, but I want to not make it happen because I'm a stickler for a 12-month lease. Yeah. So this is a way for me to,
and they very may well stay beyond that 6 months.
I had a tenant that was paying the premium. You've actually met her. She came to the meetup.
Oh, okay.
She was the tenant that was interested in real estate, but she was so fixated on like cheaping out. Like she's looking for a $30,000 condo in Southeast. And I'm trying to tell her that's not the market. That's just going to be a headache. You're going to drive yourself out of real estate investing. But she was that analysis paralysis, whatever. She kept threatening that she was going to move out because she's going to buy a 4-plex in Southeast or something. And she just never got around to it. And then she was constantly paying that $150 premium on her rent, even though she stayed for like a year. But she paid for the flexibility to leave on a moment's notice, or at least 30 days notice. But she just never exercised that privilege. But
so how long did she stay on the month-to-month premium?
I would say around a year. Yeah.
So she could have just signed the year lease.
She could have just signed a year lease, but that wasn't in her plans. Yeah. Her plan was that she was going to buy a place in Southeast and become a landlord and be a successful real estate investor and blah, blah, blah. And despite me trying to help her, bringing her to your real estate meetup and introducing her to you and me telling her, this is what I do, you should just mimic what I'm doing. Because people get in the idea that like, I'll just start small and I'll start cheap. But starting cheap is like when you bought your couple of properties in Oxon Hill or whatever. Yeah. You think you're doing the right thing by starting slow and starting cheap, but really there's a big advantage in getting an $800,000 row house and starting with that. Appreciation, ease of renting it out, and she was just a small little girl, like
higher quality tenants.
I mean, just like a small little girl trying to hold open houses in, like a 4-plex and, some of the worst parts of the city. Not, again, not advisable.
It's not my.
At some point, you started doing maid service on your properties. What prompted that, and you're billing the maid service back to the tenants, which I think is a good idea, just as part of the utilities.
Yeah, so I don't remember why I did it, but I'm glad I did. I'm glad I thought of it because it makes so much sense. It costs me nothing because it's just another utility bill. So that 105 that I was talking about, that happened that 1 month at one of my properties. That 105 was their portion of the utilities. That includes the maid service, which the maid service isn't cheap. So the maid service is about, for like a bigger house, it's $250. Divide that by 6, it's $30 something per person. So if you took the maid service out of the utilities for the month, their utilities that month would have been, 85, 75, whatever it is. So, and that sounds more reasonable. So the utilities is significantly higher for all of my properties because it includes maid service. Yeah. But it costs me nothing as the landlord. Like I was saying before about having the property always showroom ready, always ready to show in case a tenant, decides to move out and I have to hold an open house next weekend.
And the tenants have the option too of getting the maid service in their room if they want, right?
My understanding is the maid service I use, they're not in the business of opening closed doors because who knows what you'll find.
A dead body.
But my experience has been that the maid service, while they're there, if you left your bedroom door open, they'll go into the room, sweep the floors, vacuum, make the bed. Sometimes my tenants were like, "Oh, I left my door open and I came home and my bed was made. It was like I was living in a hotel." So I just kind of encourage, the maid service always comes the same time. It's the third Friday of the month or whatever. So the tenants get to know when the cleaning service is coming, and I just tell them, if you want your room to be cleaned, then leave your door open. And I do the same thing if I have a vacancy and someone's moved out. I'll tell the tenants, make sure you leave the door open to the vacant room because I want the cleaning service to come in there and clean it.
So speaking of that, so you buy your own beds and mattresses? Is that?
So some of the properties that I've purchased, I inherited the tenants, and I also inherited a bunch of bed frames and mattresses because
bed bugs too.
Well, no, please don't put that out there because luckily I've never had to deal with that.
Totally kidding.
I've had it
I'm
once.
Totally
it's
kidding.
terrible.
For those who are
because that would be a thing where the tenants are going to want me to pay for it. Like I said, I had a tenant that had some skin problem once, and he's sending me pictures of his elbows and his arms with rashes on it, and I'm like, he's blaming me.
Like you have eczema.
He said that some friend of his said that spiders can live in the walls, and he's blaming the walls. And he's like, I think we need to hire an exterminator and whatever. And I was like, no, I think the first step is you go to a dermatologist. Like the first step in your medical problems shouldn't be, what did my landlord do to cause this?
You know, heart attack. It's like, oh, it was really something in the air.
It's just so strange. Here I am as a landlord, and I'm getting pictures of some, rash on some tenant's arm.
Maybe you should have typed this stuff into WebMD, and you could have diagnosed it.
Well, I just told
Google reverse image search.
I just told them I'm not aware of any spiders that live in the walls.
It's like, this is what dry skin looks like. Have you ever heard of moisturizer?
and if it lived in the walls, wouldn't it affected other tenants in the house? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how come you're the only one with this rash? So just weird.
It's not my fault you have skin problems.
Right. So again, call your dermatologist first, not me. But anyway.
Wait, maybe that's side hustle. Could you become a licensed dermatologist?
Well,
and then people complain.
As a landlord, I feel like I have to be everything. Like I have to. I always say this. I have to do everyone's job. So, it took me forever to find a quality exterminator, a quality pest control person, and so I had to learn about all the stuff, all the nuances of being a exterminator. I've got when I didn't use my go-to lender, when we didn't use Joseph, I had to use a different lender, and I had to be the one that walked them through the loan office. So I had to be a loan officer.
Are you like Leon in that episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, where he's the house husband? The house husband.
I just feel like I have to do. I just feel like I have to do everyone else's job.
That was Leon, though. And then if anyone watches Curb Your Enthusiasm, we'll get that.
So, but back to the beds and the mattresses. So I inherited a bunch of beds and bed frames. So what I do is, some people are adamant about bringing their own beds, and they want the room completely vacant, and they don't want any furniture. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes they are like, I'm just moving from college and I don't have any furniture. So I would love to have a bed and a desk and whatever. So typically what I do is one of the properties I bought, the previous owner had all the leases set to expire at the end of May. And that's part of the reason why I had 12 vacancies all at once, because 5 leases were coming up during.
And they all left.
Right. And 5 people left. So, so I just would say when I was showing the rooms to people, I would just say, you're going to see some rooms have a desk, some rooms have a bed, some rooms don't, some rooms have a mattress, whatever. I just said, we'll move the furniture around based on people's needs. Yeah. And then I think all the furniture was claimed or whatever, except for like a desk, and we just moved it out to the common area. Yeah. And then if no one claims it after like a week or two, if no one wants it, then I call my handyman and I say haul it to the dump. Yeah. If someone doesn't need a mattress or a bed frame, I buy those. You can get them on sale for $50. Those metal bed frames that you can just kind of fold up, a couple bolts to undo it. You fold them up, you throw it into storage until you get the next tenant next year that says, I'd really like a bed. Okay,
because a lot of these tenants are transient, right? They are just drove to town with whatever they could fit in their car, and they have no furniture.
They just have their clothes and their laptop, and that's really it. And so a lot of them love the idea of having the bed and
not having to go out and buy that. It's already there. Makes their life easier, which leads to more applications for your rooms.
Right. And then there's so I employ both strategies. I say it's your choice. Like, I'll move the bed out if you don't want it. Or, if you don't have a bed, I bet I have one in storage or I can find one for you. Yep. So I'll provide it. And if they want a bed and they don't have it and I don't have one in storage, you can go online for $150. You can buy a bed in a box that the mattress, comes all shrink wrapped or whatever. You open it up. It's $150 for a full size bed. Full size is the way to go because it looks big, but it's not as big as a queen. So you get a couple extra inches as far as the perception of the room size. And if you have full-size bed frames and full-size mattresses, then you can mix and match and whatever. Like if a mattress gets old, you throw the mattress away, and then you buy the new one because you didn't have any in storage for the tenant. I'll pay $150 if someone is going to sign a 12-month lease. If you're going to sign a month-to-month lease, okay, maybe I won't buy a bed for you. But if you're going to, if I'm out of beds, I'll pay $150. Because then I know I have that newer mattress, and I'll just rotate out an old mattress.
And then you have the bed for the next time that someone else needs it.
Right, exactly. And then if I have too many mattresses at that point, then I get rid of the oldest mattress. You know what I mean? You just kind of rotate.
I like that we learned this strategy specifically from Phil, who we bought a property from, because he had been implementing that for years.
So Phil had the strategy. Phil is the person that I bought one of my rentals from. He has the strategy. He provided a TV, I think. A 32-inch TV, a bed, and a desk, and obviously a mattress. So, and that was his idea, and that's where I inherited a lot of furniture. Then you have Alan, who's the person that sold me the property in College Park. His philosophy is provide no furniture, provide nothing. And when I asked him why he did that or why that was his thought process, he said, because no one skips out on you. They'll be less likely to skip out on you in the middle of the night if they have to haul their bed away and their king size bed frame and their,
And it probably makes it more likely for them to stay long term. Like it's a pain in the ass to move your stuff, right?
Exactly. So
that's a good point, because I've had midnight move outs.
Yeah, and so have I. So, but in this case, they just left all the junk for me to deal with. But yeah, so you can see it both ways, but I'm doing it both ways. You know what I mean? And my tenants in DC are very transient anyway. It's very rare that in the DC rent by the room thing that I have someone for over 2 or 3 years. It's probably 1 year, 2 years is typical, because then they're going to graduate. They're going to work their way up. Like I had a tenant the other day call me and he's like, I'm super happy with my room. I'm not saying I'm moving, want to move out tomorrow or anything like that, but he has a good relationship with me and he wants to remain. He's like, I don't want to find a new landlord, but he's doing well in his job. He got a raise and he's like, maybe I could afford a room now that has an ensuite bathroom or a little bit bigger or whatever. So he's like, I'm just putting the little thought into your head. So when there's a vacancy comes up, he's just looking to improve. Yeah. So, when the attic room that has its own private bathroom comes up on the market because that person moves out, I'll give him a call and I'll just say, hey, are you looking to, I'll come show you that room or whatever.
That room's pretty sweet too.
Yeah. You were saying it's the pick of the,
I would live in that room.
So, yeah. So, my tenants are pretty transient anyway, especially in DC. So I don't really mind providing the bed because they're going to skip out on me either way. Yeah. But typically, like I said, prior to the pandemic, I didn't have scumbag tenants that would skip out on me. So it wasn't really an issue. I had high quality tenants that would agree to pay the lease as signed.
So is there any other specifics or tips we have in the strategy?
I'm trying to think. For me, it's all like just...
It's all second nature. So
yeah.
I think sort of like the breakdown here of the main points we hit are we're looking for a 4-bedroom row house that we could typically...
at least 4-bedroom,
to start that we
that's
can
for
add.
your search criteria, but really you're looking for potential for 6 bedrooms.
So 4 bedrooms where we can add bedrooms to it. We really want to get to the 6, which DC allows, 5 if we're in Maryland, 4 in Virginia. Strategy does not
doesn't work
well
in Virginia.
Right. So we really want to maximize the amount of people, get 6 people in the house. Premium locations that are easy to rent out.
Yes.
Columbia Heights has worked out really well for you, Petworth, College Park. You don't have anything in Shaw, but Shaw would be a great market for that. Capitol Hill would be a great market for that. The pricing strategy with charging premiums for shorter term leases. That's a big point. Billing back all utilities to the tenants and then providing beds for them if they need it. So these are all some great tips on the real nitty gritty and how to implement the rent by the room strategy, which is the strategy that gets you the most money in DC.
It's one of only 2 strategies I'm aware of that makes DC cash flow. So
the other is probably Section 8 strategy.
Section 8, right? And then
that's getting hard.
And Section 8, I always said this to what's his name? Who's this?
Joe.
I always said to Dr. Joe, do you have any fear that because all his strategy totally rests on the government continuing to pay this premium.
I don't know if they've ever lowered Section 8 rates, lowered them in history of Section 8. I think that
it's not Section 8. HUD hasn't. But how Joe makes his money with the Section 8 strategy is that it only works when it only works in DC. So when he goes on Bigger Pockets and he's talking about this strategy, it doesn't work.
Right.
It depends. There are markets that it does. I think I have a friend in Hagerstown who there may be, I don't know whether it works, but they do pay a premium there over market.
Okay,
you know
so it only works in
is?
jurisdictions where they're paying the
It
premium.
might be like $100.
Yeah.
It's not, but I'm just.
But it's not like a $1,500
It
premium.
couldn't be because no one would pay more than $1,500 to rent in Hagerstown.
But there could come a day where DC government says, because what was the whole idea behind paying a premium to landlords for Section 8 housing? To get the Section 8 housing dispersed amongst the city. So you might have some Section 8 people in Georgetown. You're going to have some Section 8 people in Columbia Heights, whatever. So if it worked, then they're going to continue to do it. But what happens if it didn't work? What happens if no landlords turn their Georgetown properties into Section 8?
It's actually more stupid than that. It's not. The reason where Joe does most of his stuff is literally the way that they've drawn their maps is that you have these random neighborhoods that are in more. So like Kingman Park is considered part of Capitol Hill, which is a much higher area.
There are anomalies that you can take advantage of.
Like when I would consider Riggs Park that are considered Tacoma, there's just the way they do the maps.
Right.
Yeah. So Kingman Park is part of the old city tax record, which is just because the way the tax record goes is like the same neighborhoods as downtown DC.
Or like Tacoma, there's parts of what I would consider Riggs Park. They're Tacoma.
Yeah. And Tacoma really doesn't make any sense, right? Like it's not anywhere close to market. It's not close to, it doesn't make any sense in Tacoma, but it is what it is there. But I guess the idea is
there are parts of Tacoma Park that are pretty expensive. Parts.
I don't know. Tacoma, like the Tacoma tax record neighborhood is pretty small.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anywhere in Tacoma where you can get $5,500 for a 5-bedroom rental.
But my point is that Joe's strategy hinges on the continuance of funding this program. And they might decide at some point, you know what? it had a good idea. There was a good idea behind it to try to disperse the diaspora of Section 8 people. But if it didn't work out, I don't know what the numbers are. You know what I mean? If all the Section 8 houses still continue to be in Southeast or whatever,
I'm pretty sure they're not going back to doing slums. I think that was a
or maybe the premium isn't this high. Or there's a budget. You could see that if we entered a recession, excuse me, and government money is at a premium.
They might cap. I think what they do in the pandemic cap.
They might change their mind, just like they passed the law or whatever to implement this program. It's just as easy that they could withdraw it.
So
I don't know.
Then you adjust, right? So if that were to ever happen, Joe will take these row houses that he bought for $100,000 in Columbia Heights, and sell them for $1.3 million.
I'm just saying that there's no law, I can't envision or I can't see any law change or whatever that would make me not be able to do the rent by the room.
They could change the occupancy limit.
They could change the occupancy limit.
It is really interesting that the 3 states here have very different occupancy limits. It just seems so random.
Right, it is very random.
It kind of makes some sense. The city would have more per house.
Yeah, but why is Virginia 4? 4 seems so low.
Well, it kind of makes sense. I feel like DC is the most urban. Montgomery, I agree, it's too low. Montgomery County is definitely more urban than Northern Virginia. And Northern Virginia, well, it's just a suburban hellhole. That whole Virginia area. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but whatever.
So the other little tip I would give, if you're looking for little tips, Hulu offers unlimited devices for like $12 more a month. So when I bought the property from Phil, we've been talking about, he had Hulu for the house. So that was their cable provider. So talking about Hulu Live with all the stations and then the Hulu library. And he was paying an extra, at the time it was $10 a month, for unlimited devices. So now what I've done is Hulu lets you have 6 profiles. So I've created a profile for each of my properties, and that keeps track of what shows you've watched and whatever. And I give all of my tenants as a value add. All of my tenants have access to Hulu, and they can watch it on their phone. They can Chromecast it to the TV or whatever through their phone, but it's unlimited devices. So basically all of my tenants get Hulu for free. So it's a value.
I love Hulu Live TV, but
it's a value add.
Their app is horrid. Have you ever used their interface? Is so
I use
bad.
it because
the interface is so bad.
I'm one of the devices that connects to it. So
do you find the interface impossible to use? It's so unintuitive.
I mean, it's not the best, but
awful. I love it. Other than that,
it serves the purpose. It gets the job done. I'm
still
able to watch my shows.
I'm just complaining.
I like that idea though, for virtually no cost.
Right. So for $60 plus 12, so for $72 a month, and I'm getting cable and access to the Hulu library, because one of the profiles is Ron, and then the other ones are my properties, and they get to, if let's say they were on the fence, my property versus another, you never know if I mentioned that you get free cable TV with me, free streaming access to Hulu,
and it makes it you feel good. Like I've had this, I have a lunch status at hotels, and so I always feel really great when I go there. What they've given me is you get a free bottle of water when you show up. It costs them $1, but I'm like, that's great. Like there's a lot of little things like that you do that just make you feel good about your experience, whether or not it's costing.
You never know when someone's like a TV buff or a movie buff.
Yeah,
and that's the tipping point in your favor versus taking a room with someone else.
Like I went to a Marriott the other day and they gave me a free bottle of champagne because I'm some gold member. And I'm like, that's great. Now the champagne was like crappy champagne. It probably cost them $3. I'm like, that's great.
And you probably didn't drink it either.
Right. So high perception value.
I drank it in my room, but I was thinking this is like some crap champagne. And I'm like, oh, but Marriott's the best. They really care about me.
It's customer service, right? You mentioned earlier, one of your tenants, you had a good relationship, reached out to you, right? And you said you had a good relationship with them. So it's customer service, which we don't see a lot in the landlording business, which is why landlords get a bad name.
That's another thing Joe's really good at is doing.
I mean, these are your customers, and that's the way I look at it. So
you're providing a product. That product is housing.
Right.
And they're giving you a lot of money for that product.
And you talked about the champagne or whatever, another low cost, high perception value thing is to let's say there was some construction in the house and, there was a leaky pipe and they couldn't use one bathroom for 2 weeks. And, it was a real disruption to them.
$10 off their rent.
Go to Taco Bell, get the Taco Bell 20 taco party pack or whatever. It's going to cost you.
That might put another bathroom out of commission.
Right. But at this point, the bathroom's back in commission. So, or you buy 3 pizzas. You know what I mean? It costs you $30 but they love it. You know what I mean? They're like, then they remember, okay, that sucked, but Ron did make good on it by giving us a little, pizza party or a taco
pizza party,
a taco party or whatever. So just something like that, high perception value. Like you said, the champagne didn't cost the Marriott very much, but you loved it.
Yeah. I was like, I'm a big baller here. Even
right.
though I was like,
right.
I give it to every guest.
So, trust me, if you show up with a bag full of Taco Bell or a bunch of pizzas, these people eat it up. So, like
literally.
So yeah, literally. So like on a Friday night or whatever, you just say, hey, sorry about the disruption, but I'm sending over, 3 pizzas, enjoy.
Very cool. Very cool.
Awesome.
All right. So we're going to wrap up. If you guys want to reach out to Jack, myself, or Ron for anything, email us at info@dcrealestatepodcast.com.
Thanks for listening to the DC Real Estate Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you want to contact the hosts, reach out to them at info@dcrealestatepodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you access your podcasts.